Good morning. We're in the international lesson again. We're in this month of January. We're going to spend our time in the book of Psalms, and we're in two of them this week and next week. We're in 93 today and 103 tomorrow. And we were, of course, in the Psalms last week, Psalms 10. And different authors, of course, many different authors writing the Psalms, some by David, some to honor David, some by Asaph, and different people. Some are great celebrations. Some are very sorrowful laments of things that have gone wrong. Some are psalms of teaching. They talk about the things we might learn. Psalms 119 is one of those teaching psalms. So we're looking at these psalms, and in the psalms that we're looking at today and next week, and the ones in between them are called enthronement psalms. They begin at Psalms 90 and run through 103 as enthronement. They're celebrations of the king. And some think that it's an annual festival. Some think it's just at a time that the new king comes in, and we have an enthronement psalm and celebration and praise. These psalms don't so much look at a human king as they look at God as the king, or Yahweh as the Hebrew name for God is. Yahweh is king, and so we're in that. Now, I want to go back a little bit, because Israel didn't start out with kings. They had judges, they had leaders, charismatic leaders like Moses and Joshua, but the people of the land in which they lived had kings, like the Canaanites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, and others. They had kings. And the Hebrew people said, boy, it would be nice to have a king, wouldn't it? Be a good thing to us to be like those other people. See, we kind of want to imitate other people. And so the Hebrew people came to Samuel, who was the last of the judges, and also a priest, and said to him, we want a king. And Samuel said, you don't want a king. King will be bad news for you. He'll take your money, he'll take your land, take your crops, he'll take your daughters to be his maids in the castle, and your boys to be his soldiers in his army. You don't want a king. Oh yeah, we want a king, because we want to be like the other people. And so Samuel is upset with them, but God says to Samuel, how, I don't know, but he says, give him a king. It's not you they're rejecting, it's me. But this enthronement psalm comes again to the time of saying, not a human. There are factors and celebrations for human kings in the Psalms, but this is an enthronement psalm saying, we are thankful that our God is our king. Now, they may have had an earthly king too in conjunction with that, but the celebration is that God is the king. Now, the important thing about that is when you have a king, there's a phrase that says, the king is law, or the law is king. In Latin, it's rex lex, or lex rex. Rex lex, the king is law. Lex rex, the law is king. It depends on how you put the word there. And in many situations, the king said, I'm above the law. I don't have to abide by the law. I can decree the laws. And sometimes that happened even in Bible times. Solomon was particularly guilty of that. He made decrees that people had to do, and placed himself above the law, even above God's commandments at times. And of course, as you follow down through the kings of Israel in the north and Judah in the south, we have that continuing pattern of the king deciding what he can do and what he doesn't have to do, and what he can make the people do. So, an important thing is having the right kind of king. Just having a king isn't going to solve your problems. Now, Queen Elizabeth II died here just a few months ago. 70 years was her reign, longer than most people lived in England. and she was a well-loved king. But there were oftentimes questions of, do we still want a king or a queen anymore? It costs us a lot of money. Aha, that's what Samuel said it was going to cost you. Cost us money. But it does make for a smoother transition from one leader to another if we have that monarchy. So it's a debated question. Now, sometimes kings can be very fickle. They can show a lot of favoritism. And even gods can be that. The Greek and Roman gods, Jupiter, Zeus, they picked favorites. And they had wives and children, and it wasn't nonpartisan. It was very partisan in terms of things as they were king. So, but there were people that saw the Hebrews and their picture of God. Even in Jesus' time, there were Roman soldiers who came to worship at the synagogue because this Jewish God seemed more holy, and that would be the word, more pure than their own gods. And so they were known as God-fearers. They feared the God of the Hebrews, but they also respected and came to him. And one of them, that Jesus healed his servant, had built a synagogue, paid for the whole building of the synagogue for the people of the town of Capernaum. So that you have that difference in terms of that. So you have the faith. Now, in Psalms 93, one of the things that it begins with, the Lord is king. He is robed in majesty. Now, Jesus said God is a spirit. Spirits don't need robes. So why does the psalmist say God is robed? Because it's a picture of a garment, a royal garment. Now, garments could cost money. If you saw King Charles in his coronation ceremony, he's wearing some pretty fancy items there back when he was made king. So kings could wear very fancy garments and robes and stuff. The psalmist said God is robed in majesty. He's a majestic God. But then he goes on to say, the Lord is robed, he is girded, that means gathered around with strength. Girded was like a belt that you wore, and if you were a king with these long robes, you could gather up your garments and tuck them into your sash or your belt, and you could do work, or you could move fast. If you were running away from a tiger, you don't want to trip over your robes trying to get away from that tiger. You grab and gird up those robes and your garments, and you run like you never run before. So he's robed with majesty, which is adoration and praise. It's majestic. Jack Hayford, the pastor of the Church in the Way in Van Nuys, California, he's passed away this past year, but he wrote a song called Majesty. Worship His majesty. And it's the beauty of God's holiness that's there. But God is also a God of strength, and he goes on to talk about that. He established the world, it shall never be moved. God has set the world in place, and it just keeps going. Keeps going. It isn't that God said, oh, I forgot about it, No, God has established it. And he talks, the writer Paul even talks about God knew us before the foundation of the world. Knew about us coming in the world, had a plan for us to be with him. Even before he began the world, knew about that. So he's established the world, shall not be moved. Your throne is established from of old. You are from everlasting. God, you had no beginning. We all have a beginning. We'll have an end. God has no beginning, no ending. God is, present tense, eternal present tense for God. All things are present tense. It isn't something's in the past and something's in the future. As far as God is concerned, he sees it all as present tense. And then he goes on to say, the floods have lifted up, O Lord. The floods have lifted up their voice. The floods lift up their roaring, more majestic than the thunders of more majestic. God is more majestic than the thunder of mighty waters. More majestic. There's that more majestic again. Again, it come one more time. More majestic than the waves of the sea, more majestic majestic on high is the Lord. There's that third majestic, majestic on high. In other words, God's majesty is one that brings order out of chaos. If you go back to Genesis 1, it says, in the beginning God created heaven and the earth was void and without form, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Okay? He brings order and life into it. And that's what this psalmist is saying as he talks about that God is a God of order. He's a God of program, of process, of things coming to be fruitful and beneficial. Now this is short. Next week we get to Psalms 103, and he goes into much more detail. And he concludes by saying, your decrees are very sure. Holiness befits your house, O Lord, forevermore. Holiness befits yourself. House. Isaiah chapter 6 is a picture where Isaiah is in the temple. And he says, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and his train, that is his robes, filled the whole area of the temple. It's like a wedding where the bride has this train behind her. Not a choo-choo train, but a bunch of cloth behind her, and walks along. And sometimes they have little kids carry that train, like they do even with coronations of kings. But he's saying that holiness befits your house. In other words, righteousness, justice, equity, all of that is appropriate to this God. Not fickleness, not favoritism. This is the God who is and who causes to be that which is good. And that's a great celebration here of God's enthronement. Now next week we're going to even pick up more on the majesty of God in terms of this. But he's saying that the temple is a place. And sometimes people who are not Jewish saw in the temple a holy God and wanted to be a part of it. Didn't become Jewish in completeness, but they stood as there was a place outside the temple called the Court of the Gentiles, where Jesus oftentimes came and taught, and Gentiles could be there and worshiping and listening to the sounds of the trumpet and the singing of the Levites, and it made a difference for them. So for us, it can do that same thing as we worship. The songs that we sing or the songs that others sing and we listen to, the scriptures being read, preaching, just all different kinds of parts of the service can help us to have a better vision of what God is all about and what his dreams are for you and for me, indeed. All right, we need to stop there. We'll pick it up a little bit more next week. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for what you have to teach us. Thank you for the word of the psalmist as describing you as very special and majestic and holy and righteous, and that your works bring order and not chaos, and that our vision becomes a better vision when we see you as you are. In Jesus' name we thank you. Amen. All right, see you next week.